was so bad that it made me delete Goodreads because I came to the conclusion that everyone on Goodreads is an imbecile who would not know a good book if it hit them on the face. Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is RupkathaBhattacharjeeofficial and today we are going to be talking about the most unserious book of all time. This book is so bad that I don't even know what to talk about. See, the thing with bad novels is that even if they are bad, at least they take themselves seriously. They try their best not to be bad, and to some people, they even turn out to be good books. This book does not do that. It does not take itself seriously. This video is about The Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Mas, and if you are another person as unfortunate as I am to have read this book, my thoughts and prayers for you and for all the time that you wasted while reading 400 pages of this absolute buffoonery. Anyways, let's start with the dedication itself. The dedication of this book is to all the girls who screamed out loud when they first read the line, "Who did this to you?" If you're a person who is screaming out loud after reading a line such as "Who did this to you?" I need you to pause, take a deep breath, and look deep into yourself. Reflect in this new year. What problems do I have that are making me scream at subpar fiction? I'm just joking, of course, but book dedications used to mean something. I have read dedications that make so much sense when put into context with the book. People also dedicate to their family members, loved ones, people who helped them write the book, but not this book. This is quirky. This tells you that it is different from the very first page. It's like Jughead from Riverdale screaming that I'm weird and I don't want to fit in because he wears a beanie. This book is exactly like Jughead if he wrote Greek mythology fan fiction. Anyways, the unseriousness and goofiness does not stop here, but it gets worse because in the next few pages we come across houses. What are these houses, you're wondering? These houses are Olympic and Sonic houses. The names sound familiar? Yes, because these are based on Greek gods and mythological fiction. So, to give you an overview, among those who worship Greek gods, Sonic gods are those who have an intimate connection to the earth, or in the case of some, to the underworld. Gods like Hades, very obviously, are Sonic gods, in sharp contrast to gods like Zeus, who are Oronic gods. But this book does not really make the distinction between Oronic and Sonic. No, it makes a distinction between Olympian and Sonic gods. Whereas in worship, usually the distinction is made because you can't really worship a Sonic god and an Oronic god together, and both of them have different requirements when it comes to their individual worship. This book does not care about that. The author is writing her wet dream fantasy and she will write it without caring for anything that exists. And what is even funnier to me is that the author has a degree in classical studies. If such a degree was offered in my country, which it is not by the way, I would have excelled at it. I would have written better Greek mythological fan fiction than this without reading any of the actual canon text, which I doubt the author has done either way, but she probably has if she passed her degree. But anyways, let's talk about the house lineages. I'll put it up on the screen so you can gawk at it too. The first one, the one that strikes out the most, House of Artemis. If you're unaware, Artemis is one of the virgin goddesses in the Greek pantheon. And what is even shocking are the children of Artemis. The children of Artemis are Charon and Medusa. Charon and Medusa, I just have to repeat that to make it more believable to me. Medusa, one of the more popular figures in Greek mythology, as per most commonly told stories, a gorgon. She was born a gorgon. She has a head with snakes instead of hair, and when you look at her, you turn to stone. And in traditional Greek stories, she was born so, she was not cursed by anyone. On the other hand, Ovid, who was a Roman poet and philosopher, wrote the more popular known myth that Medusa was violated in the temple of Athena by Poseidon, and then Athena cursed her in order to turn her into a snake monstrosity. Now, the intentions of Ovid while writing his versions of the myths was extremely questionable because he almost always portrayed the gods in a light very different in which they were portrayed in the earlier stories, and also more often than not he also presented a more negative sides of the god. What is more funny to me is that the author completely disregards both the versions of Medusa's origin to give us a more interesting one that is never mentioned again in the entire story outside of this very page, that Medusa is the daughter of Artemis conceived with a Gorgon. On the other hand, Erebus and Artemis have Charon. Now, a part of it is true. Charon is the son of Erebus, but in reality, Erebus has Charon with Nyx, both of whom are primordial goddess. Nyx is a primordial goddess of night, which means she existed before the Olympians existed alongside Erebus, and hence both of them are primordial gods and goddesses and not Olympians. I really don't understand why Nyx was completely erased from the story as a goddess, and instead Nyx, who is present in the story, is an echidna. So if you don't know what echidnas are half woman, half snakes. And most popularly, an echidna was the mother of Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guards the underworld. Here, Nyx, the primordial goddess of the night, is an echidna for reasons unknown to us and reasons I do not believe that the author is ever going to discuss. Moving on, House of Aphrodite and House of Ares. Ares and Aphrodite share two children who have been sorted into two different houses based on their gender. Now, misogyny exists in this world, by the way. Helen, because she's a woman, is put under the goddess of beauty, completely ignoring that Aphrodite is also a war goddess, and Augustus is put under the house of Ares. Achilles and Patroclus are also demigods, which is true in the case of Achilles, but here, instead of having the mother that he originally had, he now has Ares as his father and a human mother. And on the other hand, Patroclus is the son of Aphrodite. Since I have critiqued Madeline Miller in the past, I want to issue a formal apology to her for ever saying that her works are not completely accurate or did not retell the Greek myth to the extent that I was hoping. Because if retellings that try to reimagine the myths in a better perspective are like this, I'll take Madeline Miller. I'll never say a bad word about her ever in my life. I'll read and worship the Song of Achilles. Thank you very much. With that out of the way, the desecration of Greek myth does not really stop here. Let's talk about the synopsis of this book. Now, until now, if you were thinking that this book is a retelling of Greek mythology, you are kind of wrong and kind of right. This is indeed a retelling of mythology in the sense that it uses characters from pre-existing myths, and it is not a retelling in the sense that it retells any particular myth or any particular event. Instead, it is fan fiction. It is quite literally just fan fiction. If I had to write a comparison title for this novel, I would say Percy Jackson meets My Immortals, the infamously bad Harry Potter fan fiction. In here, the Greek gods are not really gods who are related to each other because the author does not want to write incest. No, the Greek gods are this separate race of people known as the Spartans, who are better than humans, faster, stronger, live longer, etc. And alongside the Spartans are the Titans, who, unlike what you are imagining, the Titans, the people who existed before the Olympians, Kronos, the god from whom the Olympians that we know the best were born. No, these Titans are attack on Titans, monster-like creatures who run around eating humans up and can only be killed by the Spartans. Now, since the Spartan population is very less, they have concocted this assembly of death. Under the assembly of death, it has been decreed that only the Sonic houses shall have the right to kill the Titans, whereas the Olympians will just watch and do what they do, lead lavish lifestyles, have the time of their lives, etc. But the population of humans, in contrast to the population of Spartans, is extremely less. Similarly, the population of Titans is much more than the population of the Spartans. So if we are going to conclude that the entire world with a population of 8.1 billion, perhaps less because this is set in a dystopian future, is being protected by literally 8 people, What are these 8 people doing? They're running around the entire globe killing monsters the entire day. And the one montage that we do get of them fighting monsters is Achilles and Patroclus fighting titans while a bunch of teenage girls um, moan while watching their video. Yes, that is a literal scene. We do realize that defeating titans is not very easy and that the titans attack in hordes. There are multitude of titans attacking a group of humans at the same time, where 3 of these people are struggling to kill those titans very quickly. So if an attack was to take place simultaneously in India, which we technically do not know if it still exists in Jasmine Mas's world, and in USA, what are these 4 people doing? Are they going to like zoom around from one part of the globe to another trying to kill titans? This is what happens when you do not use your brain while world building. Our main character, Alexis Hurt, is an impoverished young girl who is obviously torn apart by the woes of the world. While the Spartans lead lavish lifestyles, the humans are thrown to the side, living on poorly protected reservations. Alexis, who was placed with a foster family, faces abuse throughout her life, is homeless, until at the age of 19 she takes the Spartan Academy test, a test that qualifies or disqualifies you for higher education. When she takes a Spartan Academy test, it is revealed that she is a Spartan. She has Spartan blood in her, and therefore she has to participate in something called the Crucible, a fight to the death where only the best of the Spartan children are selected to make it till age 20, because 20 is the age where they receive immortality, something that the author never quite explained. Why are Spartans not born immortal? Why don't they naturally become immortal? Why do they have to be induced into immortality or something? So when her Spartan blood is revealed, everyone assumes that she is a child of Zeus, because obviously Zeus is a guy you'd look to claim any random child found on the road. Since she is a mutt, a half human, half god child, everyone looks down upon her. And by everyone, I mean literally everyone. Everyone in this book is a horrible person except for Alexis. And Alexis is forced to the crucible in the hopes that she survives, while there are 4 hot guys trying not to kill each other because they are so in love with her. Sounds like the perfect book if you are 13, but then again, if you're 13, you can't read this because the author has carefully made sure everyone is above the age of 18 while behaving like they are under the age of 18, so she does not get cancelled for pedophilia. Okay, with the synopsis out of the way, and now that we have discussed the desecration of Greek mythology, let's talk about the Hunger Games conundrum. What is the Hunger Games conundrum? A Hunger Games conundrum is when an author uses a fight to the death or a death fighting arena or anything that involves a death fighting arena as a subplot in her story without realizing the socio-political context behind the existence of such an arena. In this book, we are repeatedly told that Spartan population is extremely less. The Olympians have not had a male heir in centuries. The Sonic houses, though they have fared better in comparison to the Olympians at producing children, are also extremely small. The Olympian gods are infertile, and therefore the number of Spartans is decreasing rapidly in sharp contrast to the humans and the Titans. Why would a population whose blood is extremely valuable, whose existence is imperative to the existence of the other species around them, send their children to fight to the death? It does not make sense. And this is a trope that you see repeated in a lot of books. Fourth Wing has a dragon riding war college thing. If dragon riders are helping you win the war, you need more dragon riders. You don't kill off the very few dragon riders that you do have or that want to help you. The reason why no one questions why the Hunger Games were taking place, because very obviously underprivileged children were made to fight in the Hunger Games by the dictatorial government who wanted to make sure that their families always stay in line and never rebel against the government. It is a very obvious case of class conflict. The upper classes' lives are valued and they lead very good lives, whereas the lower classes are subdued and put into oppressive conditions that reinforces their fear and that reinforces their need to be submissive to the regime that makes their lives commodities for the source of entertainment of the very same people who oppress them. It makes sense because the children of the capital are not the ones fighting in the game. The expendable children are. The children who are already starving to death. The children who were not raised with literally everything in their lives. Now, if you are comparing that to books such as Blood of Hercules or Fourth Wing, who misunderstand the very essential class conflict that underlies the need for a Hunger Games like death fighting arena, they completely miss the point of the novels or even the point of employing such a subtype into their books. This book would make much more sense if it was actually humans being made to fight for the elite Spartans' entertainment and not the Spartans themselves exploiting their children to do so. In a society, we really would not see the top 5 billionaires sending their children into an arena to decide who is going to inherit their wealth. They are not going to do that. They're going to groom their children from childhood in order to ensure that their child, even if their child does not have any qualities to do so, inherits their wealth. That is how society works. Anyways, apart from the Hunger Games conundrum, let's talk more about class. Now, the thing what most people don't really understand is that even though people may be intelligent from birth, their intelligence has to be nurtured, and oftentimes in our society, that nourishment really comes from the amount of wealth you have and the amount of privilege that you can leverage in order to get access to not only resources but also institutions of education. In this book, our main character, Alexis Hurt, is extremely poor. She is impoverished. She does not go to a proper education institution, as she herself claims that the kids in her high school and the way they are taught is very lackluster. Higher education institutions and the access to the same are very limited and very rare, to the point that the Spartans control the humans' access to education. Everything put all together, Alexis does not really have the resources to know the things that she does. But even though she lives in 2095, she knows who Mozart is, she knows who Emily and Carl Gauss, two mathematicians, are, and she will not let you forget that. Through the entirety of this novel, she mentions those two mathematicians so many times, and the quirky fact that she wrote fan fiction about them so many times that I wish I could dig up their graves and shoot the two mathematicians again, even though it's none of their fault. The point that I'm trying to make, though, is that if you live under the poverty line, there is a very low chance that you know who Mozart is, or you know who those two mathematicians are. This is not to say that poor people are less intelligent, but rather our society is built in a way that it wants to keep the poor poor and the rich rich, and it does so by making education a privilege. It makes education a privilege and withholds it from those it considers inferior to itself. If she was talking about someone like Shakespeare, I would still question it, because is Shakespeare still relevant in 2095? Is Shakespeare still being read in a world where the literal Olympian gods are walking through the streets? Would Shakespeare still write lines such as "angels are bright, but the brightest fair"? The world where it is shown that Lucifer and the angels don't really exist, but the Olympians do, the Greek gods do. And funnier thing is that Christianity still exists in this world. I mean, good for them, I guess. Good for Jesus. Apart from all of these, let's talk about something that irritates me so much about this book. Not the fact that this is a bad book with a very bad plot, but the fact that the synopsis and the title both tell you the plot twist of this book. The Blood of Hercules. First of all, it's not supposed to be Hercules. Why make me wait till like page number 500 for the plot twist to hit? And the plot twist is something that you would never ever imagine. She is not the daughter of Zeus, no. She is the child of Hades and Persephone. Because of course she is. She is the most special little girl to ever live in this world. Even though she is 19, I'm using the term little girl because she thinks like a 13-year-old. Her brain is like 13 to 15 at max. The maturity that bellies a 19-year-old is simply absent. And this is not to say that a 19-year-old is extremely mature or something, but probably more mature than someone whose internal monologue reads like an 11-year-old who spends their time on Instagram quoting skibbity toilet memes. Anyways, this book is just so poorly written, which brings me to my next point, the fan fictionization of literature. Fan fiction, we all know fan fiction, we all read fan fiction, but there are some boundaries between fan fiction and original works that need to be maintained very strictly. The major reason why I say that is because fan fiction, as a literary genre, if I place it that way, requires you to be familiar or have a foundational understanding of the story that is being told. You need to connect with the characters, you need to have watched the source material, and you'll understand the fanfiction. And the fanfiction does not go out of its way to make a point. It does not go out of its way to introduce you to the characters, to make the characters engaging or make you feel a connection with the characters. It is just a way of a writer to explore different possibilities using the character's canon and world that has already been established by another writer. When writers who have primarily written fan fiction or have primarily read fan fiction write original novels without ever learning how to write an original work, they sometimes bring in such fan fiction level writing into their works of fiction, which really lowers the bar for other writers. The Blood of Hercules falls straight into the same trap. It is so gimmicky that you know what is going to happen next, and yet you feel no interest in it, because it does not put in any effort into making the characters engaging. It does not put in any effort into making the characters likable or interesting. Rather, it wants you to have a foundational understanding of how you would imagine gimmicky, tropey characters to behave. Morally grey man, paste, 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 paste. I did that 4 times because there are 4 men in this novel. Quirky protagonist, paste. That's how it works. If you're familiar with the tropes, and if you're someone who prefers to like turn their brain off while reading, you will enjoy this, because these characters are like the characters you've read in all the past 10 novels. But if you're someone who is new to the genre or just wants to read this novel as someone who likes to read critically, you will not enjoy this because you do not know anything about these characters. The characters are not people who have been fleshed out. And the very reason why this author uses Greek mythology instead of like establishing an original world for herself, in spite of the fact that literally anything she references has been edited out or changed to a completely different iteration, is because she wants people to come and read this book because of that connection that they have to Greek mythology. Retellings are just a market scam these days. If anything has the word retelling on it, even though it is very far removed from the source material or exists not in conversation with the source material or in a vacuum, it is because it wants to sell well. The publishers want it to sell well, and apparently it is selling well, because The Blood of Hercules was sold in a 7-figure book deal. How many writers of color who are writing original revolutionary pieces of fiction receive 7-figure book deals? You can probably count the number on one hand, and unless you're very established with a dedicated fan base like RF Kwang, I just reference her, even she does not get 7-figure book deals, you would not get to that level. But this author who self-published this book and then got a book deal receives a 7-figure book deal, because that is where we as readers have placed the standard. And I think that arises from our increased consumption of fan fiction and fan fiction derived subpar novels. You need to read good books and you need to read bad books so that you can tell the difference between both of those books. If you are only reading bad books, then even if someone hands you a good book, you won't be able to say that book is good, and vice versa. Anyways, moving on to my next point, which is the fetishization of queer men. Something about this woman writing about queer men and how all of these couples of men fall in love with a woman and are willingly able to add her to their relationship, especially considered that all of the men are portrayed as extremely masculine, hypersexualized, and always open to polyamory, is really concerning to me, because this is a trend that I notice very often in new adult or adult fantasy fiction. The reason why I point this out is because what essentially happens is that instead of having fleshed out male characters, we have hypersexual stereotypes walking around, and it becomes even more concerning when more often than not these men are described as tanned or brown instead of being described as white, because it reinforces the stereotype that men of color, especially brown men, are nothing but stereotypes that exist for the pleasure of white women. Apart from that, another thing is that the main character of this novel is disabled, and of course I don't really want to speak about disability representation because I'm not myself disabled, but after some research I found that the author herself is not disabled in the way that the main character is. Alexis is blind in one eye and she is deaf in one ear, both on the same side of the head, and unfortunately these two disabilities are not really written very well. They are used as quirks that make her more interesting to people, because everyone who sees her mistakes her for having heterochromia and not she's blind or deaf. Moreover, while she is in a literal death fighting arena, we don't really see how her disabilities impede her or not impede her in her day-to-day activities. Only when the author has to add a spicy scene or make a point about how everyone is attracted to Alexis are her disabilities brought up, not her day-to-day life with those disabilities. It's almost as if the disabilities are not a part of the book unless the author wants to showcase someone else's reaction to Alexis's disability. And the depiction of abuse in this novel, which is the primary reason behind Alexis's disability, is something that I personally did not enjoy as well. The idea that your abusers are just people who are angry all the time, or the people who are abusive all the time, is a really wrong idea, especially when you are showcasing parental abuse. So overall, this book just does everything really bad. That's all I have to say. It does everything so bad. Now, if you're wondering why I read this book, I think that's a very valid question. I do not know the answer to that. I saw everyone on Twitter reading it and I was like, maybe I should read it as well. And then I regretted it. I really regretted reading this book because it's just so horrible. And I think it's a bit of my fault as well. I'm so definitely blaming myself because I read this book much more seriously than it deserves. I read Hesiod's Theogony in order to understand how wrong the houses showcased in this book are. I read research papers on the connection between class and education to point out how wrong the author's portrayal of poverty is. It's almost as if the author portrays poverty in order to add depth to her character and then fails at doing so because Alexis has not been radicalized by her experiences. If you're someone who has led such a traumatic life, so much influenced by your financial distress and your homelessness, I would at least think that she had been radicalized by it and she would seek out active change from such a system instead of participating in it without any care of the world. I think these kind of novels are just a gross misuse of the fantasy genre. Because if you're going to write a fantasy novel, I think your fantasy must exist in conversation with the real world. Fantasy novels work well, if they work well, is because they are written in order to reflect the situation in our current world. Now, if you're a fantasy book which completely overlooks all of that while still also having content such as poverty as a backstory, abuse as a backstory, wealth inequalities, class inequalities, and then just use that as a gimmicky little trope for your main character to fall in love with other people, then it just completely negates the point of you writing a book. I mean, I do not want to sound elitist, but I do, and I hold this opinion very proudly, that do not write a novel unless you want to say a point. And I'm not talking about romance novels or novels that are written simply to give a relaxing mood to the reader, though I do have a lot to say about cozy fantasy and hope punk as genres. But if you're writing a fantasy novel that you want to call revolutionary, that you want to compare to other popular texts in the same genre, don't make it so bad. Yeah, that's the only conclusion I come to. Don't write such a bad book, don't get it published, and please, as a reader, be honest with yourself. If I see you rating 5 stars to the Blood of Hercules, I am judging you. I am judging you so hard. I deleted Goodreads because I had mutuals who had rated this book more than 2 stars, and I realized and I asked myself the question, what am I doing with my life? I shifted to Storygraph. And though this Goodreads thing is a bit of a joke because I shifted to Storygraph because Storygraph is just a superior app and like Goodreads is owned by Jeff Bezos. Honestly, I don't even buy my books from Amazon. Why am I using an app for tracking my books that I don't buy from Amazon? Most of my books are from independent bookstores or thrift stores. Yeah. So anyways, this was my review on Blood of Hercules, a book that I reviewed more seriously than the author has written it. If you enjoyed this rant review, which I think it was not a rant, okay? I hate the word rant reviews because rant implies you're doing it irrationally. I was very rational for the course of this video. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share and subscribe. You know the drill. Every YouTuber tells you to do the same thing. But please, I hope that you would do it for me because I'm telling it to you so nicely. Anyways, 89% of you do not subscribe to my channel, so please do subscribe to my channel. It's the new year, so in this new year, I aspire to make more videos. Thank you for watching. Be safe, and I hope you had a good time.